start with something simple. And once you buy back a little bit of your time, you're going to be addicted. You're going to be, oh my gosh, this works. And I want to just do this.
Welcome to the Next Level Income Show, where it's our goal to take your income, your investments, and your life to the next level. I'm your host, Chris Larson. If you haven't yet, get a copy of our book for free at our website, nextlevelincome.com. That's www.nextlevelincome.com. Just click on the book link, and I'll even send you a copy if you put your address in. On today's podcast, I'm happy to welcome George Rivera. George is a serial entrepreneur starting in high school, and he is the author of Buy Back Time Formula. After running multiple 7- and 8-figure companies and nearly burning out, he rebuilt his life as a father-first owner. George helps cash-rich, time-poor founders install people who own outcomes, systems that create consistency, and automations that remove noise, so that business runs without them. His clients reclaim 10 to 20 hours a week, raise margins, and pass the 2-week vacation test. And today, George and I are going to break down what you can learn with his Buy Back Your Time system. George, great to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me on. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. I got your copy of your book in the mail here earlier this week, and I was actually reading it this morning, and I'm really excited to dive into what you have inside the book for our audience today. Buy Back Your Time Formula. I think, one of the things that, you and I talked about the first time we met, and the things that go through the minds of our listeners a lot is, man, I'm successful, I'm working, but, I feel like I don't have time to do the things that matter. And you've really broken down, George, a formula to how to get your time back and get control. Can you share a little bit about your story and how you came up with this? Because you walked the unfortunate walk in a lot of ways to get there.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's quite an interesting path to getting to where I'm at. But I'd say it kind of started all the way back in like middle school, high school. So we're going way back in the
Yeah.
Stone Ages. And I'd say late 90s. Sorry, late 80s, early 90s. And so yeah, I played basketball, and I'd say out of about 40 games that I played in, my dad only went to one of those games.
Mm.
And so he was a very busy guy, awesome guy. He was just very into his career. He was a medical doctor and one of the best in his field in San Antonio, Texas, where I was mostly raised. And so, as a kid, you don't understand how to process that. I kind of came up with my own mechanisms to soothe myself, like I'm loaning my dad out to the
Mm.
to make it a better place, and that sort of like gave me a little bit of pride there, as far as I really was proud of my dad, but part of me really missing him because
Yeah.
like playing basketball, and I score and do something good, or step out of bounds, do something I shouldn't have done. Like kids, sons will seek to the father for like that approval, or for that, get him next time, get up and just go do it. Like we need that guidance. and
Yeah.
and I remember one of my buddies, one of my teammates scored, and his dad's there, kind of like loving on his kid, high five, pat on the back. And I remember looking at him while he was admiring his son, and I was like, man, that was my dad. And
Mm.
that would have
Oh,
crushed my dad to hear that at any point. Because like I said, he's a good man. He was a great provider. We always had nice things, nice houses and cars and trips to Europe every summer, and cool stuff. Like that was part of my identity as a friend. I'm like, this is what I bring to the table. Is I've got these cool toys. I had the old aircraft carrier GI Joe thing that
I used to love
I,
that thing, but I didn't get. Yeah, we couldn't afford that in my house. So you were the friends who I love to go over to their house and play with that, man.
yeah. Spoiler alert, it does not float. So
Yeah.
tried to do that, and the stickers kind of, yeah. Anyway, you can just
Yeah.
see the problems there. But yeah, and so at that point, like all the stuff my dad did for our family really didn't matter if he wasn't present. So the moment I needed him the most, he wasn't there.
Mm.
And so yeah, and fast forward about 20 years, I'm already kind of rolling into my career. And my dad eventually like lost up. The family broke up because of his just
Oh.
such dedication to his work. And no surprise, like you're absent, it just doesn't really bode well for the long term nucleus of the family. And but yeah, fast forward about 20 years, he's 67 years old, about to enter his 40th year in practice. And he's thinking he's gearing up for the last third of his life. His parents, my grandparents, had just passed away a couple years prior in their mid 90s, and that's like a great run. They were healthy and sharp till the very end. That's like, hey, I'll sign up for that. And yeah, but he got diagnosed with cancer with only 6 months to live. And when
Wow.
when you kind of know your life has an expiration date, or we all have an expiration date, but when you know yours is near, you
Yeah.
sort of prioritize things more. So we spent a lot of time
Yeah.
together,
Mm.
especially towards the end of his life. And one of the last words he told me was, don't miss Leo's games. I missed too many of yours. And
Oh.
holy cow, like it hit me in a couple of ways. And first,
Oh.
I thought I'd suppressed those feelings, because like as I'm sharing the story, I'm like, I hope people don't. Oh my gosh, this guy's like spoiled brat, wishing his dad was there. I'd like totally suppressed that, but when he said that to me,
Yeah.
it just sort of like bubbled up again, and I was like instantly taken back to their feeling that emotion. And then it was like sweet closure in the sense that he acknowledged that, because
Yeah.
you're a kid. You don't know, does dad even care? Like, is work more important to me? And you know, I'm not phrasing it in that way, but the mind's, who knows where the mind's going, especially when you're like a teenager. And so that was a nice closure to that. But then on the other side, it's like, oh my goodness, I am my dad all over again. I'm hustling hard, working 16, 18-hour days, giving the family a great lifestyle, but making up for it in things versus my presence. And
Yeah.
so that was the first time he kind of lovingly agitated inside of me that
Yeah.
something's got to change here. But of course, I'm working 16, 18-hour days. I'm like, I'll figure it out tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And
Yeah.
yeah, tomorrow never comes.
No, and before you dive into the next part of the story, George, I wanted to kind of touch on some things. And my father died when I was 5, and it shapes you in a certain way because I have the same feelings you did. Like I didn't get to have those experiences with my biological father. I had a stepfather, and he came to some of my stuff. But I said, well, I want to have these experiences for my son because I know how much I missed having that ability. I think my father's looking down on me and has watched over me a lot in my life. But we all have these different things. And, one of the things that came to my mind when you were sharing that story is your father seemed to instill a pride and a work ethic in you from, that observation. Like he set that bar for your family. And I think it's a real challenge. We have kind of this blessing and this curse in America where we have, in my opinion, the greatest country in the world. We have, an opportunity to achieve whatever you want if you set your mind to it. And some of us start at different places than others. I think that's fair to say. But, you know, when we go after what we can achieve, sometimes in America, we give up, some of these things like the time with the family, like being there for our children and doing these things. So I think it is a gift that your father gave you that. But the other question I had for you was when did he pass away?
Yeah, actually crazy.
Yeah.
10 years ago, 2 nights ago, November
Oh,
10th,
wow.
2015. Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, years go by, and time heals the pain, and I
Yeah.
have nothing but amazing memories. And then yeah,
How
around
old?
literally the 10-year mark, it's like, oh my gosh, that all kind
Yeah.
of comes back a little bit.
Yeah. And how old was your son? How old was Leo at the time?
So yeah, Leon, he's 10 at the time when he told me that
Yeah.
he's about 10 months old, a little under a
Oh,
year. Yeah.
yeah.
And so at that time I'm already missing things. He was kind of an early walker and even
Yeah.
communicator. I don't know, I was talking all that great, but I was missing like a lot of these first moments,
Yeah.
as he's doing his firsts. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
that
your
was a,
dad,
a big eye opener.
yeah, and your dad gave you that gift of that perspective early on in
Yeah.
Leo's life. So, he didn't have to do that. But I think this is kind of the next big part of the story, George. You were very successful at the time running your business. Share with the audience kind of, how you grew into that role and what you were doing at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, say 2015, when my dad told me that, I had already been in business for about 20 years. I started my business in 1995. I was in high school, 17
I was
years
going to
old.
say I know we're about the same age. So you started young. That's incredible. So you started in high school.
Yeah, yeah. And first year-ish, you're bumbling around, but it was a late night infomercial, and I know I'm dating myself, but a guy named Don Lapre, he's no
Oh
longer with
yeah.
us. But you
Yeah.
remember the guy? He's always standing in beach in this cool, tropical shirt, talking about his tiny one-bedroom apartment where he launched all these little ads, and that was the first time I learned about direct response marketing, and that was the first
Yeah.
time I learned about the concept of scaling because he's like, this one ad produces me $30 a week. And I'm like, oh, well, big deal. Well, this you could put it in 2,000 newspapers and $30 a week per ad times 2,000. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't even compute that. I'm like 60,000. I'm talking this is hour per week. And this is like mid 90s, which today's money is like a couple 100,000. So yeah, it was crazy. And so yeah, I bought this program. I took my mom's credit card because I didn't have one. I'm 17, and I bought it and I got the package. And I remember like, I'm gonna put this under my bed, and when I get graduate college, I'm educated, then I'll pull it out and put it to use. And then I remember thinking, no, I don't really have to do that. Just do it now. So what's stopping me from doing it now? And so I watched some ads, and it didn't work, but it instilled and implanted inside of me this dream that I could do that. And speaking of dads, my dad was more of the traditional career path. So I remember
Yeah.
him, and in a loving way, but although I didn't feel it initially at the time, he's kind of like, son, you are crazy if I go down this path. I
Yeah.
paved the way so that you could follow in my footsteps. I don't know that he said it in that way, but that's the implication. So I entered the university in pre-med. I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps. And a couple of years into my college career, I generate probably a doctor income, I would say. One of my first big successes happened in
Wow.
college. And I remember my dad taught me like banking stuff like as a teen. And I was saying like he completely absent, but he taught me some cool things, and
Yeah.
he showed me like how to open a bank account, check your balance and stuff. And there's no phone where you can like an iPhone like check your balance, so you have to call in. And again, remember my dad a couple years prior thought that I was crazy for starting this business. So at this point, I had accrued six figures in a bank account, and I'm like, I know how I'll get my dad's attention. So I three-way him into the bank where you check your balance, and it's like your checking account is blah blah blah, and it was like some 142,032 cents with a direct deposit of $10,000. It's like, oh my gosh. And my dad hears that, and he's just like, son, you got to pay taxes on that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I was hoping to say, son, you cracked the
Little
code.
little backhand compliment there.
Yeah, yeah, and knowing him and even knowing him better throughout later in his life, I
Yeah.
know that that comes from a place of concern because he has his colleagues would always be in tax trouble. I remember him saying that because
Uh,
these guys are doctors, they're not business owners, but when they run their practice like a business,
yeah.
you got to save for taxes and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was a little bit of a bummer. Fast forward to 2005, I had one of my like another kind of big year. I actually probably more growth from a previous year, and it was my first year cracking $1 million in revenue, and then it just completely collapsed. And I know
Mm.
I'm again dating myself, but this was Google AdSense. When you can set up these websites and SEO hack the game and get a bunch of clicks, and then algorithm change, and it just goes away. And
Yeah.
so the whole model sort of, at least the way I was doing it, disappeared almost overnight. And I remember I was
Wow.
at my dad's house, and I'm already sort of trained to not bring up these business things because it's like, he's
Mm.
not gonna cheer me on, so whatever. And so we're just talking other stuff, and he's kind of, hey, so well, you're kind of down. What's up? And I'm like, yeah, this thing I was doing, blah blah blah. And, end of the day, like totally collapsed. I'm kind of just like back to square one here. And he said, well, you did it before. Why don't you just go do it again?
Wow.
And very casually. And then like, so what do you
Yeah.
want to eat for dinner? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, did you
Yeah.
realize what you said? And I'm saying this in my head. You might as well put like a jetpack backpack on me, and I'm like flying to the moon. It's like, there
Yeah.
it
What
is. I
a
finally got
yeah,
it.
what a it is impressive, and those there are certain things that, with wisdom, to have somebody say that, and it's great. You hear a lot of people that have, and I've had many people on the podcast that have said the same thing that you did, George. It's like, if I lost it all, I can make it back. I don't need the money. It's the knowledge that I've learned. And that's one thing, if you're listening today, that you can take from what George said, which is, you don't take a job. Don't look at that next step from what you can earn. Look at that next step or that opportunity from which you can learn, because it's that knowledge that allows you to recreate it. Your knowledge, your network, your ability to figure those things out. So your dad lit the fire under your butt, and you got to sit down and have dinner and wait a few more minutes to do it, huh?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just like, oh my gosh, I feel like the confidence is back, and I was kind of bumbling around, I guess you could say, for another year to sort of figure out the track, but I was kind of moving with confidence and trying different things, but very excited. And then the next thing took off. And as the entrepreneur life is, it's kind of like this. Hopefully, it's more on the upswing though. Kind of like a stock
Yep.
chart that's just the
Oh
stock's
yeah.
getting better over time, but it'll have its ups and downs. But at a different level, it's ups and downs.
Non-linear
And
forward
so
progress, right?
yeah, exactly. And so that happened for a few years. I got into the agency space, helping other businesses, especially in the supplement space.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then I launched my own supplement company, like another version of it, because I initially started in supplements. And then when I had my little collapse in 2005, it's because I put all my eggs into the AdSense basket, and that ran for a couple
Mm.
of years. But I was like, man, I'm making so much money here. I'm just wasting time over here. Was my mindset. So I sort of sunset those businesses, let them wind down, and then went all in on the AdSense thing, living this lifestyle of, just like working very little and making lots of money. That was like my first taste of like true, like it felt like financial freedom, although it wasn't long term, but had a couple good years of just like, man, this ideal lifestyle. I'm still in my mid 20s and feels like this is going to last till I'm 100 years old. So I don't have to save, I don't have to do anything. This is awesome. Of course, advice for people: don't do what I did in my mid 20s. I think we can say a lot of things about that in our early career.
Yeah. Well, you hit a lot of things, and that is one of the a lot of people look at the entrepreneurial lifestyle, George, and they look at it romantically. And I've been an entrepreneur since I was little. Like when I was 12, I was selling wrapping paper door to door. I had a paper route the following year after that. Always had businesses and side things that I was doing along the way, and even my quote unquote career in medical device was very entrepreneurial because I just had a territory and the company said, "Hey, go out, and here's your budget, here's your quota. You have your own little kind of mini P&L, if you will, and you're doing your own thing day to day." But entrepreneurship can be just like sales, it can be very up or down. I was recounting a story on a podcast yesterday where my 15-year-old son was working at our car wash this summer, and we were paying him on commission to sell memberships. And he got a small base salary as well, but he was like, he's like, Dad, I was worked for like 5, 6 hours today, and I didn't sell any memberships because the weather was bad. And then he'd come and he'd be like, Dad, I sold 4 memberships in 2 hours today. I made like 5 times per hour what I planned to make. It's very up or down. And I think a lot of people that have like a traditional quote unquote 9 to 5, they miss that. Or I had people say to me, George, you're crazy to work on 100% commission. Like I would never do that. It's like they can't handle those emotional ups and downs from that. And you've had a lot of success, and part of that downside is that that constant pressure of being the person that has to answer the question or has to handle those things. And sometimes we don't do a good job of entrepreneurs of kind of setting up boundaries and systems like we have in corporate America. So you fast forward 10 years, you've got your son Leo, your father passes away, and you're in this kind of trap, not the golden handcuffs of corporate life, but you're in this entrepreneurial trap. So what point did you decide to buy back your time formula and start to help other people, learn the lessons, but really learn the skills and the formula to not fall into that same trap that you had?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and so just to go back to that 2015, Dad tells me don't miss Leo's
Yeah.
games, and I missed too many of yours, and so his biggest regret became my big mission. And
Mm,
but it took about 3 years. And first, it was my biggest mission in my own life. I didn't even know that this was a mission for other men eventually.
yeah.
But it'll kind of tie back in here in a minute. But so like I continued just going along, trying to say, hey, I know this is important, but I got to fix this. But if I if nobody else is going to do this, it's got to be me. And if this doesn't happen, business falls apart, the shoe's going to drop, and I can't provide for my family. Like all this, and a lot of it's just lies that we tell ourselves. I don't know if it makes us feel better or validates the reason we're working so hard, or who knows, something beyond my pay grade to understand completely. But fast forward 3 years, it's 2018. I scale my business to $20 million that year. Got a
Wow.
money printer just spitting out money, probably
Yeah.
bleeding lots of cash too. But you're just making so much. It's like, all right, I don't have time to stop these gaps or what have you. But I'm really not enjoying life. I think I've even said, hey, I
Wow.
just hate life right now because it's
Wow.
everything's just rolling up to me, and then you just have this fear. It's just another level. And new problems arise. 20 million a year is very different from 2 million a year. Your infrastructure is totally different.
George, you're gonna have to pay tax on that.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I do know about that part too. That's yeah, I know. It's like, oh man, I needed a cheerleader. But yeah, and so everything rolls up to me, and I'm a copywriter, create video sales letters, sales funnels, increasing customer value, recurring revenue, all the money-making aspects of online business. Like that's what I love to do. I don't
Yeah.
like the administrative. I don't like merchant accounts and customer support and all that. And I had people managing all that stuff. That's the crazy thing. I
Yeah.
had 40 people, but if you can imagine, like I'm here and then I get 40 people in this line right here. So I didn't have proper structure or delegation. And it's almost like a problem comes up, I'd hire somebody, them at the problem, and it's like maybe somebody's got eyeballs on it, so it made me feel good until they have to come back and like, all right, well now what do we do? And then I'm like, okay, I'll just do it because it feels like when it's quicker than having them do it. That's totally wrong thinking, but so anyway, was almost.
That's what got you to be successful though, was doing it yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is a season. There's a season for this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want people to hear me and think like, well, you should never do all this stuff. Like, hey, if you're starting out and you're an entrepreneur and you got this desire, unless you've got like this bank vault that you have access to, which is like almost nobody that we know, at least starting out, then yeah, you got to do a lot of this stuff yourself and then create the revenue that can
Yeah.
support the infrastructure. I do think people should have an idea of where things can go and sort of mentally prepare for, hey, this is how we're going to structure it as
Hmm.
finances allow, because that really cash flow is what's going to allow you to do all this stuff. And
Sure.
so, but I know that there's a lot of men like me 10 years ago, who sort of just built this prison around them, thinking that that's success. That's monetary success, but I
Built a
guarantee you
prison
they're not
around
feeling very
themselves.
successful in life.
Yeah. I love that you said that. That's a great segue to, I was going to bring up my favorite chapter in your book, which is chapter 5, designing a business that works without you. Um, because, you just said something like you've built this, I'm sure like I'm listening to your like $20 million a year business, and you just described it as having built a prison around yourself. Um, so, what are, if you open your book and you read it, George, what are some of the things that you've instituted and then ultimately, have taught a lot of other entrepreneurs now to,
Oh,
move from the prison to back to the freedom that you sought in the first place of being an entrepreneur?
absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, in 2018, I was ready to like sabotage my business or do something not very smart. And I called a
Wow.
friend, and that phone call was like the foundation of the blueprint, the buyback time formula that we're talking about now. High level, the conversation was, look, you're good at something, stay doing that because that helps the business grow. This other stuff, yes, it's very important, but you should not be doing it. That's kind of it at the high level. And then, all right, how do we figure that out and how to
Yeah.
delegate properly and get that off my plate? That's sort of like the next thing. Fast
Yeah.
forward 3 years after we start this process, and it probably didn't have to take 3 years. It could have taken a year, but I'm so used to having control, and I'm the only one that can do this. And it's like now my philosophy is, if I'm 100%, and I think I'm 100, probably not, but in my own head, 100%, and then somebody else is 80%, that's good enough. But you'll realize, you give them enough time, they'll be at 120% to your 100%. You realize, yeah, I wasn't that good at it. I just thought I was. And so, fast forward to 2021, the business does $50 million, and I'm living like semi-retired. I'm working no more than
Wow.
30 hours a week, off the grid for weeks at a time, traveling, pouring into my son. He's homeschooled. So, I taught him how to
Super
negotiate
cool.
real estate deals at 8 years old. And,
Love it.
yeah, and just kind of involving him on things. He's got a podcast now. He just started. So yeah, a lot of cool things going on there.
Amazing. How old is he now?
Now he's 10 going on 11.
So
Yeah.
he's got a podcast and he's not
Yeah,
even
yeah. I was
11
his
years old yet.
first guest, so he
What is it?
got a
We gotta,
freebie.
yeah, maybe we should have him on the, geez, I should have had him before you, George. That would have been
Oh,
amazing.
I know, I know. Hey, I couldn't tell you that, so now I'm telling you. So I had to be on first. But
What's the name of his podcast? We'll
it,
put it in the
it's
show
Leo
notes.
Interviews. Like his channel would be at Leo Interviews on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so now we've got two published podcasts, and we're gonna roll some more. We literally just started like a week and a half ago, and my I know it's a little side diversion, but my goal for him, and I'm like talking as if he's a client or something. But I'm like, you do this long enough, by the time you're 16, 17, 18, you're going to be a sought out after coach, consultant. People are going to throw like equity at you to be on boards to advise them, because one of the things he's going to do with his interviews is he's going to put together a book about 100 things I learned from interviewing,
Oh, cool.
insert
Yeah.
topic, business topic, and
Yeah.
then it could be themed. So like this could be
Yeah.
the foundation of like a theme thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's a serious interview. I mean, he's 10, but he might ask one childlike question to get the inner child out of the adult. Like me, I'm 48 years old. So one of the questions he asked me is, you're 48, I'm 10. What would you tell a 10-year-old that you wish you would have known at 10 so that you don't make any of the mistakes you made? Something like that. And it prompts
Yeah.
the best wisdom. And us men, us adults will be like, I want to give him the best thing I can give him. And so like it'll
Yeah.
naturally like pull out amazing things. But to tie that back to like the buyback time, like you can only
Yeah.
do things like that and pour into your family when you have the time and the mental bandwidth to do that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, 2021 started sort of like the pinnacle of time freedom. Business kept growing. I stepped out of the way. The only
Yeah.
time I was in the business, not really in it, but just like pouring in like from a marketing perspective and pouring into the team, and we put in a structure. There's a lot that went on, but really you just start with something simple. And once you buy back a little bit of your time, you're going to be addicted. You're going to be, oh my gosh, this works. And I want to just do this as much as I can so that I'm
Yes.
only focused on the needle moving activities in my business, which if you're,
Yeah.
an entrepreneur, a founder, a CEO, like, your job should be bringing in revenue, strategic connections, new product offerings, market research, and of course you should have help in doing that, but you're like overseeing all that. And so I know it kind of went all over the place there, but over the last 3 or 4 years, I've had a number of peers in different networks, different circles, and it's not like they talk to each other. And they're like, "My goodness, you're traveling, you're pouring into your son, you're starting other businesses. We've got this land business that we've scaled. We've got this wholesaling houses business, and innovations and." All these other side income streams that I hardly work at all in because I set my own frameworks up, and people are like, you got to teach how you do this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. Do I teach like how I travel? And then all of a sudden, over the last 6 months or so, this idea of frameworks and teach people how to move themselves from being the bottleneck to having this free time. What you do with the free time is all up to you. You could be
Yeah.
a 50-year-old woman who loves to travel and be with your kids, and you don't want to be inundated in your business. That's what you will do when you buy back your
Yeah.
time. I'm a family first father first guy. I know people like the me of 10 years ago are out there sacrificing their family, missing time, missing
Yeah.
games of their children.
Yeah.
And you've got iPads and iPhones raising the kids.
Hmm.
And bad things happen especially when
Yes.
that they're left to the internets all on their own.
Yeah.
It's the wild, wild west out there.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Like that's such a great story. And it kind of brings me to the end of your book where you talk about, guarding what you've won.
Mhm.
And, I mean, you just said it, like you're teaching your son now to, do what you've already done. You're teaching others to do that. What are some of the other things that you've learned and that you help your clients institute, George, to really, guard, this freedom that they've built and not fall back into that trap when something goes awry?
Yeah, that's one of the temptations is we start new things and then it's like, all right, I'm back in the grind. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of people who might be in that position where they buy back their time and they've got, a business that's producing cash flow for them, they should have the resources and now the experience to continue to implement this and do things that they start. But
Yeah.
yeah, one of my favorite things to do is, especially with somebody who's brand new, who's like finds themselves in this position, is to do what's called a freedom or a calendar audit. And if people hear this and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst at keeping a calendar, we'll start now for the next 2 weeks. So you don't have to
Love it.
think, don't worry about the past. Let's start looking forward. If your documentation isn't all that great, mine wasn't. And so you have to like look at the stuff that you're doing work-wise, hour by hour, and see, okay, is this something that me as a, I don't know, $1,000 an hour person should be doing?
Mhm.
Is it, writing content or proofreading something or banking or something? Like, no, that could be like $15, $20 an hour person could be doing that.
Yeah.
Like a one-off here and there's fine. But if this is like stuff constantly doing day in, day out, then you need to have somebody else do that. And there's a way to do that. Transfer ownership, not just here, do that. Show them what the completed project looks like, what success looks like, and you do that by creating SOPs. And today's easier than ever. You put up a Loom video and you explain it. Then you take the transcript,
Yes.
put it in ChatGPT, say, clean
Yes.
this up for me, please. And then you put it on a Google Doc accompanied by that Loom video. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm done. It is yours. Like you take this and run with it. The only time anything
Yeah.
changes is when maybe there's a technology change or we're changing a vendor or something. But like you should never have to revisit that again. And so
Yes.
there's so many examples, but that's a
I
simple
love
one.
it. That's a fantastic example. And just to summarize, you have to you mentioned, hey, my time's worth $1,000 an hour. And I've noticed this with a lot of my coaching clients, George. You say, hey, what are your high value items that you do? Negotiating, contracts, hiring people, sales, all those things. And I find this routinely. High performers, their time is worth 100, 500, $1,000, sometimes even more per hour. But frequently for business owners, it's $500 to $1,000 an hour. And then you go through, like you said, and you do an audit. And you said, well, what are you actually spending your time on? And you're like, oh, I'm writing email content, or I'm posting on social media. I'm doing this. It's like, well, geez, you could pay somebody 15 or 20 bucks an hour, to do that. And I love what you said, because I've done the same thing for years, doing a Loom video, putting the SOPs in a database, the team can access those. But now you can create an AI agent where your team can just ask a virtual version of George and say, hey, George, what should I do in this circumstance? And it'll access that information and tell them exactly what to do. We're in an incredible time where we can use all this technology and buy back our time even quicker than before. And I think that's really, one of the things that I get asked is, how do you see AI affecting real estate, affecting business, what you're doing? And a lot of people, it seems, have their head in the sand when it comes to technology. And I think the people, like our boys, your boys, my boys, ourselves as business owners, if you can embrace technology and AI and use it, you can multiply the value of your time even faster. And, instead of sticking your head in the sand, you can take a lead in terms of the business world with people that aren't doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I sort of opened the door for my son to start a podcast is because, yeah, everybody's going to start learning how to utilize AI. And I think it's going to help make a lot of things more efficient. But it's
Yes.
also going to remove a lot of jobs and opportunities that maybe were present now or even in our recent history that are no longer needed because of AI. So
Yeah.
one of the reasons was so that he could have a lot of just human interaction, human connection, and establish himself as a leader and an authority. But yeah, AI plays a big part of that.
I love it. George, you've got your book is a template for doing everything that we talked about today. In the back, you've got an awesome toolkit talking about, the systems, the automations that you've been talking about, how to do all this stuff. How can our listeners get a book? How can they learn more about what you do? And especially for, those, salespeople, business owners, entrepreneurs out there, that are looking to buy back more of their time, how can they get in touch with you and learn about all this?
Absolutely. Yeah. The easiest way is just go to buybackformula.com. And yeah, you showed the book. I got one here too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's 128 pages and it's a very packed of information. It's like a
Yeah.
workbook. It's a heavy
Yeah.
book too. It's nothing fluffy. I have just enough information to give some context as to why it's important, but then it's like we get to work. And really, like I put all my knowledge on buying back time in this book. I know there's other marketing books out there, and no criticism, it's a valid business model, but they'll sort of give you the little nugget, and then it's like, you want a little bit more? Here's a link to buy my big program. Like, I'm here to help you if people need more help, but honestly, my goal is that you buy this thing and you're like, that's it. I'm good. Like, I know how to
Yeah.
do this. So you can go to buybacktimeformula.com. There's a link to buy it. It's free plus shipping. Just help me pay shipping. Like I said, it's a heavy book, but it's like $9.95 shipping. And there's also links to my socials. You can add me as a friend on Facebook or follow me along. One small note, I'm just now getting my socials going. I've been a direct response guy, buying traffic and getting tons of sales that way, but I've never had to depend on social media. But this is more of a personal branding strategy here that depends a lot on just getting content out there. So I do post daily on my Facebook, just a daily message to my ideal audience, which is cash rich, time poor, founders, executives, CEOs that are sacrificing family in pursuit of business success. And I'm here to say it doesn't have to. In fact, your business can grow when you step out of the way, because instead of like doing all the little mundanes that are important, but they shouldn't be done by you, you're only focusing on strategic growth things. And that doesn't require, 40, 80 hours a week. Business can't help but grow. In my case, it more than doubled from $20 to $50 million stepping out of the way. And so, my goal is to share that with other fellow men. And it works amazingly well for women too, but I know most men will just resonate with the situation given the experience. So I hope it can help anybody who is to read it.
Yeah, I love it. George, thanks for sharing your story today. Thanks for sharing a lot of the lessons. And check out the Buyback Time Formula book. Tons of great resources. Like you said, it's an awesome workbook. I think it's perfect length. And also look forward to getting in touch with your son, Leo. George, thanks for joining us today.
Awesome, Chris. Yeah.
Hey, Chris here again. I hope you found this episode valuable. Now, I have one more thing to gift you. We have a page for my coaching clients where you can get a free copy of my book, as well as much more from previous guests on the show. Just check out nextlevelincome.com/coaching to get a free copy of my book, audiobook, and much more. I'll send you a copy of my book and cover all the shipping costs as a thank you for listening to the podcast. Also, please like, share, and take just 90 seconds to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts.